Hello and welcome to another episode of the TRC Podcast. This is episode number 17. I'm your co-host, Jake. With us are the usual suspects, my co-host, Ryan, of RJM Analytics, and our head statistician and analyst, and Adam, our other kind of statistician and analyst. I'm kind of here for, I don't know what you'd call it, moral support or emotional analysis or whatever. But yeah, we weren't on the air last week. I got sick last week, and both Ryan and Adam had stuff to do. So regrettably, we couldn't get together last week, but we're back this week. I'm still a little bit under the weather, but getting over it myself. Hopefully it doesn't affect the show too much. We've had two races, of course. Texas Sunday before last, and then Talladega yesterday. Well, it's up to the guys. They can talk about what they want to.
You don't need to talk about Texas.
Well, yeah, I don't really have much interest in talking about it. Like the race in general was fine. I mean, no race at Texas is a great race, but by Texas standards, I thought it was pretty good. But of course, there was a lot of extracurricular stuff, and every YouTuber that there is on NASCAR, every big name social media personality was calling it like the worst race ever. And just in apocalyptic doomsday status about the sport right now and all that. But, and of course we all know about the whole safety thing that's been talked about ad nauseum the last few years. But we're not really going to talk about that today because there's been enough people that have beaten that horse to death. It's not really worth going over. I'll just say once again that it's really, really annoying to me the way fans are acting and just this manner about the sport. I've never seen so much negativity around it, even though we've had one of the best seasons we've had in a long time. But it's not really worth going over that. But we did have a very good race yesterday against Talladega, which still didn't escape criticism from these same people. But again, who cares about these negative Nancy's?
Anything?
Yeah. And so we'll just talk about, I guess, whatever we want to. I'll let Adam speak first. I kind of want to front load the show with him some because he has to kind of leave earlier than we do. So I want to get him talking. But just say whatever you want to.
Well, I mean, my overall thought about Talladega was how great of a race it was. I mean, we had 57 lead changes, I think, and I don't know how many of them were legitimate yet, but I've always wanted to have plate races or go back to the era of plate races where they weren't always settled by a green white checker and they weren't all wreck fest, and we could have a legitimate medium to long run to the finish where the drivers really sort themselves out naturally, and that's what we had, and it was really cool. Even though we had the stupid caution with 7 to go that ended up creating a green white checker, it still ended up being a natural finish with no wrecks, and there was no big one. And that's to me, this is a race that showed what super speedway racing can be when it's not a clown show, and that it's really a test of drafting skill and strategy and just bravery, and it's really cool to see that. I would say the only negative to this race was that the third lane never really formed except for a few times, and that happened in both Talladega races with this car. So I wonder if it's a Gen 7 aero issue that prevents the top lane from really forming. But that's a minor complaint because the two lanes of racing we had were very good, and I really have nothing bad to say about this race.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think lack of 3 wide racing was maybe just a minor inconvenience. Otherwise, really all you could ask for, especially after last week, was just that we had a bullshit-free race. And I guess other than having the caution for Hemrick sitting on pit road, that's pretty much what we had. crappy ass car failures. At least not in the Cup race, there weren't. There were no huge wrecks, just really one medium wreck. Recky Spinhouse doing his thing. And we had the whole last stage pretty much clean and green until that late caution, and then we had, miraculously, a green-white checker that didn't even turn into a shit show. No wreck. And obviously, as the resident Chase fan here, I thought that was a wild move that he made. I thought it kind of brought back a lot of flashes of, I guess, Jeff Gordon in the 2007 fall race, the way he just jumped out in front of the outside at the exact perfect time. And then also kind of also reminded me, really the whole last stint before that caution kind of brought back some 2001 EA Sports 500 flashbacks there with just absolute lights out racing every single lap. And, you can feel the adrenaline pumping and everybody's, just waiting for the wreck. And in this case, it never happened, but I mean, it was just total edge of your seat. It's like, I've said before that to me when, playoff hockey is kind of like the ultimate takes years off your life thing in sports for me, but the last 10 or so laps of a plate race is always right up there, and especially when you have that many cars still left in the race, and there hasn't been a huge wreck, and it's just so it's really the type of thing you live off of. I mean, it's stressful in the moment, but afterwards, when it turns out the way it does, like this, where you get a satisfying result and a satisfying no bullshit finish, it's just one of the greatest things about watching this sport for me. So yeah, overall, pretty much nothing but positives to say about this one.
Sorry, go ahead.
I guess, unfortunately, not everybody can be pleased, and what a shock. The certain driver who was running his mouth on Twitter all week decided that he wasn't happy enough with this, and that there wasn't enough three-wide racing, and that was like the first thing that came out of his mouth. It was too hard to pass, Well, how about this? If it had been easier to pass, we probably would have had more wrecks. So there's that.
Yeah. See, I used to feel the same way you did about these super speedway races. Like a few years, I would say probably most recently, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago, it used to be actually my favorite race or favorite type of race. But over the years and just seeing what it devolved into, I just got so sick of it, and it kind of jaded my whole view of it. But it has been nice this year with really, 4 of the 6 races this year really didn't have an abundance of crap this year, like the Atlanta races and the Talladega races. It's just the Daytona just was what devolved into what the crap shows that they usually do. But the other races were good and didn't really have too much to complain about.
I actually thought the 500 was pretty good too.
Yeah,
it was really only the summer Daytona race that was just an absolute atrocity.
Yeah, and it was really nice and refreshing to see that. I also thought it was a very, very good race. I rated it as being tied with Atlanta, the first Atlanta race, as the best race of the season for me. Like with you two guys, my only nitpick complaint is that there was only the 2 lanes of racing we saw. We never really saw that third lane develop, and there was, as Junior and some other guys, it was kind of hard to really make up ground if you were in the middle to back of the field. You kind of really could only do something or make moves if you were near the front of the line, it seemed. And so we didn't have as much variety as far as the leaders that we had with all the lead changes we had. And that was the only nitpick thing, kind of the only reason that I would still rank maybe Atlanta as being better, plus the fact that Atlanta just surprised me so much. But again, that's just nitpicks. How often are you going to see a super speedway race that has 57 lead changes and no major incidents? Like I was saying, I don't think it's as good as that race was, but I was actually talking in the chat during the event how it sort of reminded me of the 2000 Winston 500. Just a race that's held in very, very high regard by a lot of fans. I mean, some of that's for an obvious reason, but that's a really great race that I've always enjoyed watching, and this kind of reminded me in that same vein. You know, we had a lot of action, likable result with, you know, no major incidents, and so can't really complain too much about that. And hey, we even got the wholesome Ryan Blaney, Ross Chastain moment after the race that I didn't even know I wanted. So it was a great move by Chase to win the race. 2 laps to go. You know, I'm happy for you and for another guy that we have in our server for that. He just, I don't really factor like super speedway races in that much as far as how, you know, a season goes, but I sort of further cements him as kind of the best driver of the season. And it was just an overall nice, enjoyable event. And I never thought I would see Talladega be a thing where we'd have both races that didn't really have any kind of crap at the finish. But as a testament to, you know, this car, you know, people can hate on it all they want. And believe me, I've seen people hate on it today, even in this race about it. But, you know, this car has done, I think, what it's supposed to do on these tracks. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, I'll just briefly bring it up. I mean, we try not to bring up too many engineering and aerodynamic terms on this show, but I've said for a long time, and I've been an advocate for the fact that these cars need more drag, and I think part of the reason why we had so many incidents in these races because the closing rate had become so fast, and the cars had gotten a bit too fast, and that there was not enough kind of a drag effect on them. But with this, they seem to have gotten that a lot better, and I think that that's really helped, especially at tracks like Talladega and Atlanta. It's still kind of a problem at Daytona, but these races have showed the potential, and I'm really glad that we got through this super speedway season without much to really grumble about.
See, I think though it's really all more than anything, it's just a driver thing and a generational thing. I think because there's no give or take anymore in these plate races. It's just all take all the time, which is obviously great for the racing product. But I mean, you see guys throwing big blocks on lap 50 or whatever when you got so much time to get back to the front. And I don't really agree either with the whole you couldn't get to the lead from the back thing. I think if you were really trying hard enough, you could have, but everyone was just kind of too afraid to get out of line. I mean, we saw Chase get out of line and it won him the race, but other guys just didn't want to do that. They were waiting until the last moment, just kind of playing it safe, and then whoever would be leading the line would just block like hell. And I've mentioned this pretty much every plate race, but my favorite era of plate racing would be the late 2000s, before the tandems. Especially at Daytona, I thought that was just you could drive your way through the field. Guys also paced themselves, and they didn't drive like it was the last lap of the race with, you know, more than halfway to go. And I think it just made things very hectic, and you know, the cream rose to the top. But with this, I think you have a lot of the same sort of, it's, you know, you can't just, it takes time to get to the front, and the closing rates have been not quite as fast as they were with the Gen 6, but it's also, you know, more of just a thing where a lot of drivers don't really have the kind of finesse on these types of tracks that, you know, the last generation, I think, did with when you had Dale Jr., Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, and all of those guys who really knew how to methodically drive these types of races. But I mean, today, or yesterday, rather, it was like, you know, you can really pick out the guys who are the best on these types of tracks. And I think the one who comes to mind for me, at least for this year, is Eric Jones. He has been up at the front in every single plate race this year, and like one of the few guys who it seems like really has this style of racing down. So I guess I've probably gotten too far off on a tangent here, but I just needed to bring a couple of those things up.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think part of what, going off of what Ryan said, I think the recent safety concerns that we've had this season probably created a little bit more give and take and respect in yesterday's race. I mean, there were still a handful of stupid blocks and stupid moves, but it wasn't nearly as frequent as, pretty much every plate race since 2017 or so. And I think that's partly why we didn't have any big wrecks. It's because drivers were more conscious about safety, even if it was only subconsciously in the back of their mind. And I think that's a good thing. Going back to what Jake was saying about the 2000 Winston 500, which is one of my favorite plate races ever, there were no crazy blocks thrown at all in that race, as far as I remember. It was just, respectful move making. And that's mostly what we saw yesterday, except for Stenhouse.
And it also had sorry, just to say one thing, it also had that super draggy, very tall gear package that I spoke of earlier.
It did, and the yes, and that race also had the roof deflector and the wicker bill, which created more drag. So I think that, and it's like it allows guys to drive through the field without the closing rates being completely insane, and that's kind of the happy medium we need to find.
Yeah,
and I
I
also
think
think that. Oh,
you finish.
I was gonna say, like, I what Ryan was saying about the adrenaline rush, and I think the key to an exciting and great plate race is the anticipation that they might wreck, but then not wrecking. That's what makes it awesome, because it's like you are on your edge of your seat, and it could happen at any moment. But then when they all somehow survive without wrecking, it's like the most amazing thing you've ever seen, and it really shows it's a testament to the skill of all the drivers that they're running, 190 miles an hour, inches apart, and nobody crashes.
Yeah, I can maybe to go back to the whole playoff hockey parallel. It's like basically the end of a plate race is like when your team's up by one goal and the other team has the goalie pulled, and you're just like, please end this game now or get an empty netter. But yeah, I think basically what I was trying to say earlier, it seemed like the guys further back in the pack weren't really as interested in mixing it up. Like, Truex, obviously, he just didn't even try all race long. And, I mean, I don't blame him. He had nothing to race for, didn't want to risk anything. But it seemed like you had a couple of different guys who just didn't really try to do a whole lot yesterday. And then it was everybody at the front who was still sort of blocking a bit too much, but not quite as much as we've seen. Which again is obviously good, but it's still like, I think you used to see more guys just kind of let another guy take the lead early in the race because they knew it wasn't worth it to try to put up the fight. So, but yeah, I mean, really, all in all, I would say the best super speedway race of the year, and I think that's kind of all we need to go over as far as the race itself, unless there was anything else.
Yeah, only thing that I wanted to add was that that era that you spoke of plate racing, late 2000s, early 2010s, or just 2010, before the tandems. That was my favorite era of that style of racing too. Like 2010 was just incredible. Like every one of those races that year was amazing on those tracks, and that's just kind of a nirvana that we never have and probably never will ever reach again. Like, I don't even know how many lead changes there were between those four races, but it was insane. And from an entertainment value, I do kind of still prefer a race like the June 2020 race over something like this, where we did have like a third lane, more maneuverability, even if it was a higher risk of accidents. But there's still a lot to be said for a race yesterday where we didn't have that happen, and it's just we just kind of have gotten so sick of it and so used to it over this time that it's almost like I don't even know how to react when we get something like we had yesterday. It's like it feels so foreign. So, yeah, that's pretty much all that I had to add.
Yeah, I think what I was going to say though is I briefly touched on him, but Eric Jones, I think he was the ETDR winner yesterday, and he was also, I calculated this after Atlanta, I believe, and ever since then his results at Daytona and then yesterday, I'm pretty positive, at the highest ETDR average of any driver this year on the super speedways, all six of them combined, which and he's having a really good season as it is, even without all that. But I think that's also kind of, I've mentioned how his ratings have been inflated a lot because Ty Dillon is his teammate, who is the worst rated driver in Cup, who other than guy who's in really, really bad equipment. And actually, he's ahead of Ty Gibbs somehow, but he's a rookie. He's had a lot of issues early in races. But, yeah, I think a lot of why Eric Jones has been rated so highly by my system this year is because he's been really, really good on these sort of unique tracks where equipment, you kind of throw it out the window. And this is really the pinnacle of that. I mean, we would see him contend for wins on these tracks with Gibbs. He did win the fall 2018 race at Daytona, or the July race there, and I think, in my opinion, I mean, we can kind of debate best couple of super speedway racers in the field right now. I think everybody would probably throw Ryan Blaney, Bubba in there, as much as I hate to say it, Hamlin, but Eric Jones is really right up in that top 3 or 4 to me, and then probably Chase at this point, just based off of this year. So, I don't know, it seems like ever since Dale Jr. retired and ever since Keselowski kind of stopped being the guy in these tracks, we haven't really had like any guy you go into every single year as, you know, the favorite. And I think that's almost kind of refreshing, though. Is just adds to the amount of, kind of suspense and unpredictability of these events, that nobody can just dominate every race on them. As incredible as it is when Dale Jr. won 4 in a row, or when Keselowski led, what was it like in 2016, just dominated basically all of them. But I think it just also speaks to just how great the parity has been this year. That there's been no track type at all where anybody has been the dominant guy, and then on these play tracks, it's even more of kind of a crapshoot that you can have Eric Jones dominate one of them, Brad in the 500, when I don't think people really expected him this year to be dominating races. And I mean, even Kyle Larson, the first Talladega race, who was a terrible plate racer usually. So, I guess the last thing I wanted to say on that note is that Jones is the 17th driver this year to get an ETDR win, which, I mean, in my opinion, the 19 winners that we have, that's great. But I think what matters more to me than that is that we've had 17 drivers by my system who have been the best driver in a race. And, I mean, we've had years like 2011 where were a bunch of different winners. I think 2011 also had 19. But, there were not probably 19 drivers who had the best race in a race that year. A lot of those wins were complete flukes. Thinking about like Paul Menard, Regan Smith, Trevor Bayne, those were not indicative of them having the best race that race at all. And this year, it really has been not 19, but it's been pretty damn close to it, and we could easily get there by the end of the year. So, yeah, I think that's just, my kind of weekly praise of just how competitive things have been this year.
Yeah, I think that I agree with ETDR that Eric Jones has probably been the best super speedway racer this year. Not just in terms of running up front consistently, but also his aggression to continue to drive through the field and make passes for the lead. Like, he's done that in every one of the races. And with that, I don't think he's wrecked himself in any of the races, so that's really impressive. I don't know that I would say he's the best super speedway racer in the series, but he's definitely top 3 or 5. And yeah, I also agree that having, as far as overall series parity, having more drivers potentially be the best driver in a given race is much more important than having a bunch of different winners, because wins are circumstantial, whereas running up front all day is not. And we're in this really good place where there's probably 20, maybe 25 different drivers.
So this, I'm pretty sure, is like the most since 2002 or 2003.
Which makes sense. And, it's actually even more impressive than those seasons because we have significantly fewer laps now with all the road courses. So there's just less opportunity to lead laps. So the fact that we already have 20 in 31 races is pretty amazing. And I don't know how many did it last year. I think it was only like 13 or 14.
Like 14 or 15 last year, I think.
Okay. Yeah, but that's, again, like, to me, like, parity of leaders is more important than parity of winners and even top 5 finishers. So
yeah,
it's really cool to see that.
Absolutely. Yes, while we're on the whole analytics discussion, I should probably briefly bring up my luck metric that I've finally kind of finalized here this past week. What it basically is a combination of caution pass differential, which I then subtract average running position from it because caution pass differential is kind of inherently biased towards drivers who don't run up front, who have less positions to lose under caution. So you hardly ever see any driver who's like a top 5 driver of a season end up with a positive caution pass differential. I think the only 4 times that's happened in the last few years are Denny Hamlin in 2020, which I believe has been the luckiest season I've ever seen. Probably the season that caused him to go from a guy who I just kind of mildly disliked into outright rooted against every single week. And then the other one was Joey Logano in 2018, which I've been on record saying is the weakest title that I've ever seen. Anyway, the luck metric is a combination of that with average running position as kind of an equalizer. And it's also average running position minus finishing position, which I know is sometimes the driver's fault if they don't finish as well as they run, but most of the time it just generally think of average running position as more sustainable, more kind of indicative of a driver's performance than I do finishing position. So I have I combine those 2 things, and that's how I get my luck metric. And this year, Landon Castle has been the luckiest driver by a long shot, which I kind of noticed looking at some trends from, because now that he's run more than 10 races, he's part of the official kind of scoreboard, being eligible for all those stats for this year. And he has a 21.5 average finish, but I've noticed like every single race he's run has been very high attrition, and he just basically finishes there because he's one of the last guys left. Although yesterday he did legitimately have a very solid 11th place run, and he was pretty much in the lead pack the whole race. Then the most unlucky drivers this year have been Hamlin and Kyle Busch, which, I mean, their seasons have kind of swapped from early in the year. Kyle Busch was one of the top guys every week, and then ever since about Sonoma or so, he's just been can't catch a break at all. And then Hamlin has been kind of the opposite of that. So, yeah, I think this pretty much all adds up. Oh, Stenhouse is also up there for most unlucky. Although, I mean, anyone who watched the races can kind of tell he creates a lot of that luck himself. But what I have noticed this year, though, is that when I've applied this for past years, usually the drivers who run up front and finish up front, it's very evenly matched as far as how lucky or unlucky they are. If anything, somewhat tilted towards most of the leaders being lucky, because just the absence of bad luck is luck. It has to all equal 0 in the end. And, if nothing happens to you while you're running really well in a race, that's going to have to even up for somebody who did have some bad luck. But this year, the only driver in the top 10 of ETDR who has a positive luck differential is Ross Chastain. So I think that just really speaks to how chaotic of a year this has been.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because it's obviously easier to be unlucky when you run at the front because you have further to fall if something happens to you, and vice versa. But this year, I feel like more so than usual, the fastest cars have had a lot of problems, both self-inflicted and just unlucky, and that's created, I think, that as great as the running position and leading parity has been, I think the finishing parity has been even more ridiculous because the leaders have had so many problems, and that's partly what have made the races so entertaining and unpredictable. And man, that Landon Castle average finish stat kind of blew my mind when he said that his average finish is 21.5, because that's better than like Harrison Burton, Todd Gilliland, Ty Gibbs. Better than drivers in much better equipment. And it's not because Castle's run particularly well. So even in this race yesterday, his average position was 22nd, which is better than he normally runs, but it's not like he was really up front all that much. Only 34 laps in the top 15. So he was still very lucky to finish 11th. But it's now among like the non-crappy, the drivers in reasonably good equipment who have been the luckiest. Because I would have to guess it would be like Austin Dillon.
It is Austin Dillon who's the luckiest besides Castle this year. And let me look through really quick. Oh, actually, it's Austin Dillon and then Ty Dillon.
Okay. And then I feel like Austin Cindric has been pretty lucky too.
Yeah, he has been, and McDowell actually is after Ty Dillon, which yesterday, classic case of that. He got up there through the pit cycle and then just hung on to third.
Yep.
Yeah, Austin Cindric has been definitely very kind of under the radar lucky in a lot of his finishes, especially the top tens. I have said my piece on time and time again that, most overrated statistic in NASCAR. And the fact that both he and Chase Briscoe, who for most of the season has been pretty unlucky, but the fact that they both have legitimate chances to advance to the round of 8, it's just, it would probably be the worst round of 8 advancement I've ever seen.
Yeah, I was just about to actually. I'm back now. I had to step out for a bit, but I was just about to ask, about your guys, what your exact quibbles with are over the points we have now, because I will say for the record, which we're not gonna get into all the Texas stuff and all that, but I think it's the penalty that was given to William Byron was ridiculous, and it's ridiculous that he's probably not going to make, the next round at this point, but yet Briscoe...
I think he still has a very good chance.
Well, he has a chance, but the fact that he is even in this position, is ridiculous.
He's actually above the cut line right now, and he's a good road racer, so I think he has...
he's like 12 points out, I think.
11, I think. Last I saw it was 11 points behind.
Okay. Racing Reference hasn't updated their points yet because they're idiots, so, okay.
Wow. In either case, the fact that
this is one of his best tracks, easily his best road course, I think. And
in any case, the fact that
you have to think that they'll go for a lot of stage points. Of course, so will the other guys. But yeah, what I love, and Sean pointed this especially, is that NASCAR acting like wrecking somebody under caution is more dangerous than wrecking them under green. What kind of backwards logic is that exactly? So, like, if Byron had spun him under green instead of under caution when he was going faster, it would have been less dangerous.
Right.
And then, the other thing is, obviously I'm biased here, but, are we just going to give Hamlin a pass for also running into Byron under caution? Literally the only difference is that he couldn't have enough car control to hang on to it when Byron didn't need to spin him. And so, it's like, are we now going to have guys flopping like they're NBA players and intentionally spinning when someone hits them under caution?
Oh, God, I hope not.
Yeah. It's just one more kind of over-policing thing that we don't need, and the inconsistency on it is ridiculous.
Yeah, but the point I was getting to is that, like, regardless, it's ridiculous that he's even in the position that he's in right now, and that Briscoe, like, he hasn't had, like, a very good season, but he has had enough performance to where I say it wouldn't be particularly egregious if he made it, but Cindric is another story. I mean, the guy he's in the chase because he won the Daytona 500. That's it. He's lucked his way into a bunch of finishes better than he deserved. He's really just been a 15th place driver to 20th place driver all season. And, I try not to get too much worked up about these things because I know in the end they're ultimately really meaningless when it comes to, like, determining who's really the best. But it kind of really annoys me that he might get in over somebody like Byron. So,
well,
what's annoying about Cindric's season is the fact that he's a rookie and people are kind of hyping him up now as having this great rookie season. I said something on Twitter last week about Noah Gragson and the Xfinity year he's having. How pump the brakes on him. He's in his fourth season. This is what he should be doing against a depleted field of all the guys he was racing with a couple of years ago are in Cup now, and everybody else is way younger than him. And someone replies to me like, "Yeah, well, Austin Cindric also needed a couple of years in Xfinity to get better, and now he's in the round of 12 as a rookie." Like, so as he let me check my notes here. 26th ranked in ETDR. Obviously, that's not fair to him when he has two really good teammates, but yeah, he's had like a 20th place season.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if either Briscoe or Cindric makes it to the round of 8, they will be the worst round of 8 participant in this format. Going back, I mean, Kurt Busch in 2020 was pretty bad. He had that lucky win at Las Vegas that got him there. Ryan Newman in 2014, Hamlin in 2014 was also bad. Those are probably
what I think of.
Who?
Almirola in 2018.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Yeah. How did I forget about him? Yeah, Mr. Fifth in points with his stroker season. Yeah. So it's probably those 5 or 6 that are in the mix for the worst round of 8. And honestly, Suarez, if he makes it, he'll be among the worst too, because he's had a very inconsistent season and he's gotten outrun by his teammate for most of it. So yeah, we're kind of in this place where, I mean, Reddick, obviously he's been a top 5 driver all year, got eliminated in the first round, and it's like Christopher Bell, even though his season is overrated by results, he's been better than Briscoe and Cindric and Suarez. So
Busch.
Yeah, exactly. And Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick has been better than those two also. So it's like and look, that's one of the downsides to a year with crazy amounts of parity, is that you're going to end up with wacky results like this. And, that's, you kind of just have to accept it and realize that the points finish doesn't really tell us much of anything about how good the drivers actually were, and kind of block out what the media and stupid people on Twitter are saying, and just do your own evaluations and, search for the truth yourself. I think that's the best way to handle it.
Exactly. anything else we need to go over before we go into next week?
What do you think about AJ Allmendinger returning to Cup racing?
Speaking of media narratives, I like AJ. I think maybe not as much as Jake does, but great personality. It's always great the amount of enthusiasm he shows whenever he wins, and really all the Kaulig guys. That Chris Rice dude, he's like, reminds me of kind of your typical sports coach who's like a really great motivator, gets guys to want to run through a brick wall for him. That's just the whole sense of community that they have over there. Them and Trackhouse, it's really refreshing and really great for the sport. But Allmendinger, I've been kind of annoyed by this whole sort of having his best season ever in NASCAR because of what he's doing in Xfinity, and then cherry picking the road courses and short tracks in Cup, which have always been his best tracks. I think next year that he's full time, we'll kind of see some reminders of maybe why he was basically on the verge of being forced into retirement a couple of years ago. Although I do think Kaulig is a better team than ATG was back in like 2018 or so. Honestly, probably the best Cup equipment he's ever had. I don't think RPM was that good back in 2010.
Well, he had that one half year with Penske before his drug test.
Oh, right,
thing.
yeah, I forgot about that.
But that's it. Yeah,
I think his career, peak of his career was when he was with Petty, 2010, 2011, when he was like a fringe top 15 guy in those cars that AC Kane wasn't even really winning in those years. So
yeah, I mean, I think that the changes to the schedule have made him have made it look like he's suddenly having a career resurgence, when really it's just that there's suddenly 3 times as many of his specialty track, and that gives him 6, 7, 8 chances to win a year, regardless whether it's Cup or Xfinity, compared to having only 2 chances a year before. And I think next year he'll probably run, he'll be a 15th to 20th place driver in Cup overall, but I do think his average performance will be kind of exposed a little bit, because he'll have to run the intermediates, which he's never been good at. And unless he gets a win on a road course, I don't think he can point his way into the playoffs. So, but I am happy that Kaulig hired a full-time driver for the 16 instead of splitting it. It's just, it's good to have as many full-time drivers and good equipment as possible.
Yeah,
I also think
Sorry, go ahead.
It also has to be pointed out that, as much as I don't think he's as good right now as a lot of other people do, but it is impressive the fact that 4 years ago he was basically considered total damaged goods. I think in 2019 all he had was like 5 or 6 Xfinity races, was pretty much semi-retired, was even saying himself he never really wanted to run a full schedule again. And suddenly, he kind of builds it up into full-time Xfinity, then full-time Xfinity and Select Cup races, and now it's full-time Cup again. So that's been a very impressive arc for him, I think, in his career.
Yeah.
I mean, it is good to see that, talent in this case is giving him another shot, rather than just, having money or being marketable. It's like he has driven his way back into a full-time Cup ride, and that's really cool to see.
Yeah, excuse me. As I pretty much am like the guy that's highest on him here, or of our community, mainly because I just have always loved his enthusiasm, as Ryan kind of brought up, but I've always felt that way about him. I mean, even going back to right after he came back from his unfortunate suspension, I felt that way about him since really before just about anybody else. I don't think he's like a great driver or like a high-tier Cup driver by any means, but I did always enjoy, his style, which, he could be over-aggressive sometimes and do some dumb things, but he always brought some excitement and color to the sport that you didn't get from a lot of guys, and I always appreciate that about him. And as far as now, I'm not going to try to claim this is his best season, or anything like that, as Ryan was saying, but I do think this is the best he's been as a driver in NASCAR. And the reason I say that is there's a maturity about him now in the race car that I have not seen before, to where now he's actually, even if it is an Xfinity Series, I grant you that's easier, but even in some of the Cup races he's had, where he's grinding out finishes that he never used to have. We seen how tough he's been, like when he came to, I think it was Gateway this year, after I think he'd never seen the racetrack before, hadn't in a long time, and just came in there overnight and had a pretty good event. And Sonoma, I think, where he had some kind of issue, cool suit issue. I think he had another malfunction at Indy, and he had a really good gutsy run there. And, it used to be like, you'd see him like he might be fast in a race, but as soon as any kind of adversity would happen, he'd hit the wall or something, and then it'd all fall apart. But he's just a different guy now. And I really like that, admire it, and just combined with his personality, that makes me really, really like him. And he's probably my favorite contending Xfinity driver outside of maybe Sam Mayer. Now, that being said, I'm not the biggest fan of him getting a Cup ride full-time next year in the 16 car. For one, because of sort of the reasons you guys brought up, but also because I really would much rather have somebody like my favorite driver, Corey LaJoie, or Parker Kligerman, or a number of other guys that really haven't gotten a shot in decent Cup equipment before over a retread like AJ. But if we're going to have someone like that, I guess he's better than Daniel Hemrick or maybe some other options that we have. And, now that Gragson's got his deal lined up with Petty GMS. So, I'm basically fine with it. I mean, I think those guys, they're fairly interchangeable. I don't expect him to be, again, much better than a 15th place guy myself, but it is good that we have, as Adam said, a talented driver in a decent ride to make the field even more complete.
Yep. You want to move on to next week?
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't want to talk any more about Xfinity or any of that?
Not really.
Right. All right.
I guess very quickly on that subject of Allmendinger, that was a really great move he put on Sam Mayer at the end of the race. Then the up truck finish. Congrats to Brett Holmes on the win. Brennan Poole 2.0. NASCAR needs to stop throwing the fucking caution when they're 100 yards from the finish line, and that's the end of the story.
Yep. And it's funny, on Racing Reference, I'm looking at it right now, they still are crediting Matt DiBenedetto with the win, which it's just shows how much of a cluster the whole finish was, that nobody even really knew who won.
They're crediting Holmes with leading the last lap, right?
Let's see.
That's what I thought, because I saw Benedetto finishing first with 0 laps led.
So now it says that he's led 1 lap, and but it still says that Holmes led laps 94 and 95, the last 2 laps. So they can't even make up their mind.
Yeah, Racing Reference, unfortunately, even though it's the place that basically birthed us as a group, is a total joke now. And apparently they're not even going to provide results for F1 and Open Wheel Series next year, which, whatever, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
The Roval.
Yeah.
So, I guess kind of my default pick for every road course this year has been Chase Elliott, because he's been kind of a reversal from his luck for the past few years. It's and he won every single road course and then couldn't buy a break on the ovals, even though he contended plenty on them. This year it's been kind of the opposite of that. But I'm just going to say he goes back-to-back. Though I think it'll be the usual road course suspects. Reddick will be up there, probably Larson, Byron. Briscoe I expect to be strong until he inevitably gets stuck back in the pack and then can't make up any ground. How about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking forward to the race. I mean, the Roval has been a great event all 4 years it's been run, and I don't see why this year will be any different. I think it'll be just chaotic and exciting and unpredictable. At least behind, the lead. I do think Elliott's the clear favorite, and probably Reddick is up there. But I think there's going to be a lot of crazy shit happening in the middle, in the back of the pack. And it's going to be interesting to see the different strategies that the guys on the cut line use. Like, are they going to stay out for stage points, or are they going to just go for a good finish? Either way, I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and the Roval has become one of my favorite races of the year. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, the Roval has been a great race all 4 years that we've had it. That's been, I think, quite a surprise to a lot of people, and it's one I definitely look forward to every year as well. As far as who I think is going to win, I mean, obviously the easy, smart money is on Chase. I don't have anything against him, but I hope he doesn't dominate it, like for entertainment's sake. But we'll see what happens on that. The smart money's on him, but I'll pick, just for the power of positive reinforcement, Larson. I want to see him dethrone Chase, but for real this time, not what we saw at the Glen. I want to see it happen, so I'm going to pick him to try to make it likelier to happen. But I think a dark horse kind of will be. I think Joey's going to show up this week. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I mean, it may just be because the usual thing where he just gets up there on strategy or whatever, but I feel like he's going to be a factor this week that people aren't really expecting. But I just
will run his usual invisible fifth place that he always does on road courses.
And then, like I said, I hope it's a good race. I'm hoping for a Larson win. And other than that, I expect there to be like the usual chaos that we see. It's been a pretty crazy event every year. I don't expect that to really change. I echo what you're saying about Briscoe, because it seems like they do that every race. Road course race, they try to stay out for the points and then completely screw themselves on the race strategy-wise, but, who knows. So that's what I have to say about it.
All right. I think that kind of covers things.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so that's all for you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to go in a bit, don't you?
Yeah, I got to go to work in about 15 minutes, so we're good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I was just going to, I guess, say my piece about F1 just to round the show and then finish this up. Saw the Singapore races after the first race. In a long time I watched live because I was, getting over being sick and couldn't really sleep. So I woke up and saw it. I have watched all the races this year, but most of them have just been on delay. On one hand, it was a fairly interesting event because it was only a second win event that we've ever had there. And like you had some cars that were close together and they were racing, but as is often the case on street course, you just can't really get much passing. Obviously the whole complexion of the weekend was changed with what happened with Max when his battery died in qualifying and he only ended up 8th on the grid. And so that meant that he was not able to clinch the title last week, although that's still pretty much, it's an inevitability. Very good chance that it'll happen this week. And if it doesn't happen this week, it'll definitely happen in the next race. But he had a crazy event. He was really the only kind of entertainment that there was in the race because he was the only one really going forward or backwards pretty much. He stalled the car on the stop and he lost 6 spots and then he gained them back. And then he was trying to break into the top 5 later in the race, but then had a huge lockup and basically had to spin. So he went all the way back down to 16th, then worked his way back up to 7th and passed, and still finished ahead of Lewis Hamilton and all that. But at the front, just Sergio Perez and Charles Leclerc just gapped everyone. Like even with 2 full safety cars and 3 virtual safety cars, they still basically had a pit stop gap over the rest of the field. And Perez really kind of just owned the race throughout. There was a little silly, ridiculous thing where apparently he committed like this safety car infringement like 2 or 3 times apparently where he was lagging too far behind the safety car. And they said that they were going to give him a penalty, but it wasn't going to be until after the race that they were going to announce it. Was it going to be a 5-second penalty or a 10-second penalty? It was impressive at the end of the race how he managed to just pick up the gap from like 2 seconds all the way to 7 seconds, I guess anticipating that there was probably going to be a penalty. That was pretty damn impressive. It was easily the best of his 4 wins so far. And it was still up in the air exactly what decision they were going to make after the race. But at the end, they decided to give him one single 5-second penalty, which meant that he still won the race. And of course, everybody, in comment sections or chats, F1 fans were complaining about it, going on about how it was unfair, and they were favoring Red Bull, and blah, 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 and all that. And it's just one of those things where, I see something like that, and I'm like, and I'm supposed to take F1 seriously. Like, I enjoy watching it sometimes, but that stuff just drives me crazy. I mean, like, we're really going to say that this guy drove the best race and he just owned everyone, but no, he doesn't deserve to win the race because he lagged too far behind the safety car a couple times. Some trivial shit like that. It just never ceases to amaze me. Like, as bad and hand-wringing like as our fans can be sometimes on the NASCAR side, it's still nothing compared to these people. Like, I don't understand. It's just, these people are miserable. But regardless, the right decision was made. Congrats to Perez on the performance. As I said, Max has not been as dominant as the stats and kind of the races, the results have made him actually look this year. But he's still clearly the best driver in the sport and now the best car. And, it's only a matter of time before he wraps that up. So, I guess sort of, if we don't talk about it the next time, like, advance congrats to him. It's been a fairly fun F1 season, even if the parity has been kind of overrated and we haven't kind of gotten what we were hoping for on that. We have seen a lot more close action, but yeah, that's my take on that. Like I said, you guys said that you were done earlier, so I guess that'll wrap things up here. Thank all you guys for your support and for listening and watching. Be sure to like the video on YouTube when it's on. Subscribe. And if you have anything interesting to say or any suggestions for the show, please comment. Leave some feedback, what you'd like to hear more on the show. Be sure to follow Ryan on Twitter, his stuff, RJM Analytics. All our Twitter handles are in the description of the TRC podcast.
I did that.
Now. Yeah. So
be more convenient.
Yeah, and so we're all on there. Like I said, especially check out Ryan's stuff because there's a lot of interesting stuff that we don't have the time to get into on this show. And so yeah, the TRC podcast is Ryan, our co-host, head analyst and statistician, Adam, our co-statistician and analyst, and me, Jake, the co-host, and like other analyst, and sometimes wannabe statistician. This was episode number 17 of the TRC podcast. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.